Hi, hello, good morning. Thanks for being with us, and welcome to day 2 of MTL Connect, presented by Printemps numérique 2022. Very excited to kick the morning off, and I just want to remind everyone to please turn your cell phones off. There will also be a question and answer period at the end, and we'll pass a microphone around. So I hope everyone's been learning a lot so far. This morning, we're here to talk about how will decentralized finance change our everyday lives. And I'm very excited to introduce our speaker for today. She is the CEO and founder of FLUIDEFI, an award-winning dashboard for banks and financial institutions, amongst other things. Lisa has a wealth of experience in big tech and is passionate about the DeFi revolution, global financial inclusion, and female leadership. I won't take any more of her time. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Lisa Loud.
Thanks, Olivia, and salut tout le monde. Hello, everyone online and here in the event, the venue. I'm very excited to be talking to you today. And my goal today is actually to change your mind maybe just a tiny bit, maybe like 2 degrees about decentralized finance. If you've been thinking about it, if you're curious about it, maybe now you'll be even more curious and have a vision of what this could do to change our lives in the future. A bit about me, how I got here today. My background is in software engineering, and after many years in Silicon Valley, big tech, I landed at PayPal at some point, and I decided that this was what I wanted to do. I wanted to change financial innovation for the world so that we could have better and fairer opportunities for everyone around the world. So in 2017, I was working at PayPal. I had risen to the top. I was head of merchant acquisition for the North American market, and I was pretty comfortable. It was nice, you know, I had an easy job. But there was a moment in time where suddenly I thought, this is not what I want to do, because PayPal is not changing the world for the better anymore. PayPal is just trying to become a big bank that can be accepted by other big banks. What I want to do is something more. I want to make an impact on the world. So I leapt out of big tech and into cryptocurrency. My first job was at BitMEX as CMO, and I started to understand what this cryptocurrency world was about. And I ended up running several companies in the crypto space. Finally, in 2019, I met Eric Voorhees, one of the top leaders, thought leaders in the space, and we hit it off very well. He invited me to come to Denver to begin running Shapeshift, his company. So I moved to Denver. I had my dream job. It was amazing. I had this office looking out over the Denver beautiful mountains, and I was just so happy I'd finally arrived. And then 2020. The pandemic hit. Shapeshift did not do very well in the pandemic, and I ended up coming back to Montreal, where I grew up. I love Montreal, but I have never, until the pandemic, worked professionally here. So it was a big change for me. However, I spent a few months, and in June 2020, I realized, okay, this new thing is happening. DeFi is happening. Decentralized finance can actually fulfill the promise of what blockchain was supposed to do in democratization of finance, making a difference in the world. I got very excited about DeFi. I started building, I started trading, and that's what has brought me to this point today. I built a company with tools to help other people get into the DeFi space and to address some of the problems in decentralized finance. But, okay, I'm gonna drop this in now. And what is the one issue that we all should be thinking about and talking about today? Any guesses from the audience? Climate change, exactly. So I'm going to come back to this climate change question because this is actually what motivated me to get into this space and to do the work that I've been doing. I need to give you a little bit of a background in DeFi so you can understand what it is we're talking about and why this is exciting. All right, the old way of doing things. traditional finance, you see we've got a sender and a receiver. Sender, receiver. And in between, we have a bank, PayPal, credit card companies, another bank, we have a payment facilitator, we have an aggregator, and every one of these entities along the way is going to take a cut of that transaction. So the sender sends a certain amount of money, everyone takes their little bit, and the receiver gets some of that money, most of it usually. Now the difference is in decentralized finance, you have a sender and a receiver. In between, you have the blockchain. There's nothing else in there. There's no banks, no credit card networks, no PayPal. It's just sender, computer program, receiver. So as you can imagine, this can create a lot more, a lot of advantages. I'm going to talk about specific cases now and things that you understand, things that you have used probably. So do you ever buy something with a credit card? Anybody who buys something ever with a credit card? So we know how that works, but do we really know how that works? Actually, the process of credit cards is fairly complicated and there's some hidden parts to it. When you have a credit card transaction, you've got the merchant over here, you've got the consumer over here, and a transaction takes place. We all know about annual membership fees in credit cards. We all know that if we pay off our balance, we don't have to pay interest. So essentially, we think of credit cards as free. But there's another part to this. There is a 2.5% fee that is taken on every single transaction in a credit card. Now, you might think, okay, that's not my problem because the merchant pays that, right? I'm trying to go back. There we go. The merchant pays that 2.5%, but do they really? Not really, because you know if that 2.5% is being charged to the merchant, they've got to make it back up somehow. So they're passing it along to us. And believe it or not, it is $50 billion that the credit card companies take out of the system every year from us, from the merchants from us. So there has to be a better way. In fact, it has gotten so bad that a couple of weeks ago, Canada, being the leader that Canada is, passed a law that said that merchants are now, retail businesses are now allowed to show that up to 2.4% fee and charge it directly to the consumers. So if you pay cash, you'll pay one price. If you pay with credit card, you'll pay an extra 2.4% if the merchant chooses. This is fairly new, October 6th. So Canada is recognizing that this hidden fee is not a good thing. So what if there was a better way? What if we could take that $50 billion and put it into our pockets? I think that's possible. And I'll show you how. Of course, it's not going to be $50 billion because it's no longer a monopoly with the credit cards. But so now as soon as it's a free market, the fees are going to go down. But here's how it works. And this is the complicated part. So I'll make it as simple as possible. Essentially, you have a liquidity pool. You've still got the merchant and you've still got the consumer. There's still a transaction going from one to the other. However, it goes through the liquidity pool and the transaction fee gets paid to the liquidity providers. So this new concept of a liquidity pool is actually made up of your capital, my capital, and the banks can also participate in that, but now they don't have monopoly on it. Now anyone who has capital can put money into this liquidity pool and can participate in the fees that come from that transaction. Another case study, exchanging foreign currency. Have you ever exchanged foreign currency? It might be a little less common for you to exchange foreign currency. But here are some of the top reasons that you might do it. You might buy something abroad from an international seller, or maybe you have a destination wedding you're planning. You might be sending money to friends and family. There are lots of reasons to transfer your currency into another one. What is not well known is that this is extremely expensive. On a round trip foreign exchange transaction, the banks will take a 13% fee, making them enough profit to come up to $73 trillion a year. So that's how much the banks are taking out of the system. This is kind of how it works. Banks hide this. So global FI here on this slide is fixed income. And what that means is anything involving foreign exchange and some other things. They don't tell us how much is from foreign exchange of their $123 trillion that they're making every year. However, we know that foreign exchange is one of the most lucrative things that a bank can do. So a good proxy conservative estimate is about $73 trillion that they're earning on this. Now, let's think about this for a second. You put your money in the bank. The bank pays you 4% per year, maybe, in interest. And then every time they do a foreign transaction, they're taking 4% or more of that transaction. That's crazy. How do banks get so much liquidity? We give it to them. So banks have the capital because we're putting our capital into the savings accounts, and they are doing this foreign exchange that's highly lucrative, but they're not giving us much of that. Let me ask you, can you call up your bank and ask them, what did you do with my deposit that I made last week? What are you doing with my money? They won't tell you. It's not transparent. They keep that stuff hidden. So we'll come back to transparency in a second. In fact, banks only need to make 2 or 3 transactions in FX a week for themselves, which is basically settling all of our requests. So it's very little work for them. It's highly lucrative, and they're not sharing most of those profits. So what if there was a better way? What if we could share that $73 trillion between all of the people? It is possible. And that is what, again, we have a liquidity pool. But in this case, you don't have merchants. You just have people over there, people over here, and money transferring between them. The money goes through the liquidity pool. And once again, the liquidity providers are the ones who are earning the fees on that transaction. In this case, there's no big entities involved. Of course, they can still provide liquidity, but so can we all. We can all put money into that liquidity pool, and we can all earn transaction fees. This is a much better way of doing finance and a much fairer way of doing finance. So what is the draw in DeFi? Decentralized finance. We have better returns. We have fairer distribution of returns. We have lower fees because, again, once it's a free market, then we're competing for the lowest fee, and the lowest fee will win and get the most transactions. We have transparency. If I put a deposit into a liquidity pool, I can check at any moment, any second, what that money is doing. Unlike a bank deposit, I know what transactions are happening, how much I'm earning on it. Second by second, I can check that because the blockchain is transparent. And then finally, it's faster. Of course it's faster because if you remember the original traditional finance slide that I showed at the beginning, there's a lot of people involved in any transaction, and each one of those takes their time, has to validate the transaction, make sure it's not fraudulent, and take their cut, of course. So if you only have to go through a smart contract, which is a computer program, if the money goes from me to a computer program and then to my recipient, that is much faster. It takes maybe 10 minutes to validate that transaction. Make sure I have the money and make sure they can receive the money. That's all that's needed. So what are the risks? People always ask me that next. Yes, there are risks. Before I go into the risks, I just want to say no change happens without innovation, and no innovation happens without risks. So of course there are risks inherent in this new way of doing things. I think it's worth it. Everyone has to make their own assessment, but there are risks in the old way of doing it. Nothing changes unless we are willing to step out into a new way of doing things. So here I've listed a bunch of the risks. I'm just going to focus on the financial risk because that's what most institutions are focused on. So there are several risks. I'll go through this part fairly quickly. It's a little technical, but there's a credit risk, a market risk of manipulation, and then there's a tax risk. How do I pay taxes on my gains? I've spent the last year and a half really focusing on building tools to address these issues. So for the credit risks, we've built tools that are deep analytics and monitoring to avoid those credit risks. And then for market risks, we actually use AI to monitor wallets to see if someone's doing what's called a pump and dump, trying to manipulate the market, bring up the price, and then sell off and have it go down. This is not limited to bad actors, by the way, unless you count large financial institutions as bad actors. We've seen Jamie Dimon come on stage and say, Bitcoin's a scam, and next thing we know, he's bought Bitcoin because it went down because he said that. So this happens quite often. And then tax risk, we've been focused on building tools for making it easier for people to report on their taxes and figure out what they should be paying. All right, I promised I would come back to climate change because climate change is really the big issue. For the last year and a half, my team and I have been working on an algorithm, a technology that will reduce the amount of energy required for DeFi transactions by 99.99%. We've filed a patent on this, and we're very excited because, all right, let's address the energy consumption question because it's always there. The media has gotten hold of this idea that Bitcoin cryptocurrency uses a lot of energy, which, let's put that in context. The entire financial system for banks uses twice as much energy right now as the entire cryptocurrency market. So banks are currently using twice as much energy. What would happen if we could transfer most of that energy, most of that financial transactions and everything onto the blockchain? Now we think, okay, energy is going to go up, but then we use this technology, and I hope that everyone around the world is going to be using this technology over the next 10 years to reduce energy consumption on the blockchain by 99%. We could have a huge impact on the amount of energy used in the world for financial transactions. And money is a foundational element of our society. It always has been. We're not going to get rid of finance. We're not going to get rid of money as the means of transacting and conducting our society. So a better solution is to keep finance and make it more energy efficient. Those are the points that I wanted to get to today. We do have some time for questions. I've actually left a little extra time for questions because these are exciting concepts, but there's a lot of new information here, and I want to be able to come back and address anything that has come up in your mind. Hit me with the difficult questions. I don't mind. But let's get together and change finance for the better together.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Do we have any questions right now while we explore some of these topics? Okay. I have a couple of questions. I mean, I'm very fascinated. We actually talked about a little bit last year too, and I'm happy to see you again in this capacity. Okay. Essentially, first of all, congratulations on filing your patent. That's a pretty big advancement.
Yeah, a lot of trials, errors, and failures led to getting something this good.
I have maybe a bit more of a global question that might spark some other questions in the room, but in order for me to get into DeFi, which I currently am not, unless I'm mining Bitcoin by myself or another currency, it's kind of contingent on me having fiat invested into the system. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. And we didn't talk about stablecoins, but stablecoins are a really easy bridge from fiat to go into the system. Fiat, just to define terms, is the name for a currency of a country. So if you have Canadian dollars or US dollars, you can actually buy stable coins, which are backed by those US dollars, and place those into the system. But I want to say one more thing about that, because every country in the world today is trying to develop their own digital currency. It's referred to as CBDC, so a central bank digital currency, because the digital currencies are much more efficient and save a lot of time, a lot of energy and everything. So yes, you do have to have fiat invested into a stable coin today, which is perfectly safe because it's totally backed. All the dollars that you buy are backed in a bank somewhere. But in the future, I think we're all going to have digital currency because our countries will convert to them.
So I think that's the big question, is what does the future of crypto look like? Is it kind of comparable to a Tinkerbell theory whereby unless everyone believes, it's not real? Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. It's, in a way, it's kind of true. Unless everyone believes, we can't make the kind of sweeping changes that we would like to see in the world. And that is actually the reason that I've focused on institutional investment, institutional capital. Because if we can move the institutional capital into the DeFi space, it does not matter if everyone believes. That's where the money will be, and so everyone will have to go there to get to the money. And that's exactly the reason that I focused on institutions right now. So it's not true, though, because we can actually make huge sweeping changes today, even without having everybody in the system. In developing nations, in Africa, there's already huge social change coming about because of blockchain and decentralized finance. But to really make a global sweeping change, we do need to have more people in the system.
Sure. No, and I think there's a lot of benefits, obviously, to crypto and blockchain technology. Given the political and, I guess, social climate, the distinctions in political and social climates across the globe, do you foresee an issue with certain governments in certain countries actually getting on board with the notion of crypto and blockchain technology, given that it almost has a socialist feeling behind it?
Yeah, there's huge problems. I had a slide on regulatory risk because there's no clarity right now. There's a lot of, and I mean, China has banned crypto completely, and you know, so there's many barriers to be overcome. What I've seen, though, actually from my experience at PayPal, when PayPal started, it was completely illegal. It was not legal.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
The category of payment facilitator did not exist. So PayPal launched its product, discovered it was illegal, and what happened? Because there was such a need for it, there was so much adoption, the laws changed to accommodate that. And it wasn't good for banks, you know. So the incumbents did not see it as a good thing, and yet it changed things because there was social acceptance of it.
That's okay. Lisa, I'm wondering if you can elaborate a little bit more on the liquidity pool. It's a notion that I find very interesting. Firstly, is this a notion that has been around for a little bit? Is this your theory? In what capacity does it currently exist?
Yes, good question. The first liquidity pools were introduced by Bancor. I don't know the exact date, but in 2020, that's when Uniswap came out and really popularized the idea. Liquidity pools were born in Canada. They were born in Canada because Vitalik Buterin, who is the inventor of Ethereum, came up with this idea of a liquidity pool, which is actually fairly brilliant. Okay, we'll go into a quick discussion of it.
Sure.
Okay, so if you think about how stocks are traded, it's on an order book on the New York Stock Exchange or some other stock exchange, right? So the order book sits there. They control it. There's orders that come in. Some of them are resting orders. Which ones get executed. There's all of that management to take place. How can you do the same thing without having someone manage it? Right. So a liquidity pool is essentially the same thing as a stock exchange order book, only it's a smart contract. And you have to have two assets. You have to have like maybe an Apple token. Let's imagine an Apple token instead of stock, and then US dollar stock. So these two have to stay in balance at all times.
Got it. I'm going to read more about that. Thank you. I do think we have a question at the back.
Hi, Kimia Muzagar. I work at KPMG right now. So you were talking previously about how there's a lot of mediators between the sender of payment and the receipt of a payment. Who's to say that this won't reproduce itself within the crypto space, given that you've created a product that will in the end be a form of mediator in the sense that you want to reduce gas fees, of course?
Great question. And just to be clear, the tools that I'm building are not central tools. We don't take custody of assets. So we provide tools to read what's happening on the blockchain and to more easily interact with the blockchain. However, it's a great question. How do we prevent institutional creep from taking over this whole thing? By nature, the blockchain is decentralized, and by nature, liquidity pools are accessible to anyone who has an internet connection. Which is not to say that we could reproduce the entire thing with institutions making their own liquidity pools and not allowing anyone else in. So it's yet to be seen how this will develop. I guess it's a bit of a race, whether retail can adopt it fast enough to make it interesting for institutions to come in. But institutions always want to trade against retail. So if retail is here, that's where institutions will come.
And as a follow-up to that, with the need for cybersecurity in the space, won't it mean that there will be not an overarching, but there will be a need for one or several companies to take care of the blockchain and make sure that it isn't constantly infiltrated and that aren't tons of, around,
Yeah.
I don't know how many months ago it was, but around $600 million in Ethereum was stolen and it just disappeared. So won't there be that need for several cybersecurity companies to come in and make sure that it's regulated to a certain extent?
Also a very good question. So most of the hacks that have happened have been due to people not following best practices. Do we need to have someone come in and mediate this? I don't think so. I think what we need to do is have the technology evolve to the point where it can mediate itself. And decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs, are an alternative to like a big brother watching, where a DAO is essentially a bunch of people who come together and vote on things. It can certainly be abused, and the technology is very young. So, great question. I don't have an answer yet, but I think we will see the answers come out within the next few years.
Does that answer your question? Okay, good. Lisa, just to go back really quickly to, for example, China banning crypto. Is it essentially contingent on the government monitoring the access to internet, or in a society where internet is limited, like China or Cuba, for example? Is there a world in which anyone with a Wi-Fi signal can trade in crypto and get into DeFi, or are they really at the mercy of their government's policies?
Yeah, to a large extent, they are at the mercy of their government's policies. But if you think about the internet, you can put up a website, and it is located inside a country. If you put up a decentralized AMM, it's called, an order book that is decentralized, it's on every blockchain in every country. So you may not be able to access it, but they cannot shut it down.
I understand. Okay. It's all very fascinating stuff. Is there a world in which banks or financial institutions somehow utilize crypto for their purposes?
Absolutely.
And what does that look like?
Our customers are banks and financial institutions, so I'm seeing this develop. That's a big question, though, that I don't know if I can answer.
That's okay.
Completely. However, I will say that the institutions are very interested because of the higher returns and all the advantages that I mentioned: better returns, transparency, faster. All of these are interesting to institutions too. They can get better yields from decentralized finance than they can in the old asset classes.
Right.
So it's like we're wooing them in, and also they're scared of the whole thing.
Sure. Well, it's good. I mean, it's providing a bit of a dichotomy there.
Yeah.
I guess I have so many questions. Does anybody have anything else for Lisa before we wrap it up? We've got one more. Okay.
Yes. Hi. So, quick question, maybe on more of the environmental side of things. How exactly does your technology have an impact on blockchain's environmental impact? And how do you maintain what's so important to the transparency and the proof that comes with blockchain?
Great question. And just to be clear, the patent that we've developed is only for decentralized finance, for liquidity pool transactions. It's not, and actually it goes back to your question from KPMG. It actually is, the more that we are able to reduce the energy as a top layer, the less decentralized it is. So in a way, the more we're able to use our technology, the less of proof of work, immutable transactions, copied everywhere on all the nodes, the less that's true. But the blockchains themselves, there's many blockchains solving the problems of blockchain energy use. And specifically what we're doing is to address what banks are doing with financial transactions, which is DeFi. I'd be happy to explain it more to you. It's hard to condense into one thing, but you're absolutely right that it takes more thought.
We're just going to wrap up. But last question really quickly. Is there any kind of metric that would allow us to project in some capacity how long this might take to get everyone on board?
Everybody has their opinion. I believe that we'll see a huge migration over the next 10 years. I think over the next 3 years, we're going to be in this chaotic transition time where people are figuring it out. I speak to a lot of bankers and finance people who are trying to understand this space. And I think that'll go on for the next few years. And then once that happens, then it'll be a slow adoption. Banks don't move so fast. 10 years from now, I hope to be here on stage and saying, what we predicted 10 years ago is now a reality, and everybody can have access to these opportunities that they couldn't have before.
Well, I know you started off by saying that you're here to, hopefully affect or impact someone's thinking just by a nominal amount, even by a little degree. I'm certainly have some ideas in my head. I hope everybody's taken some fruitful thoughts from this presentation. Lisa, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for your attention, too.
Stay tuned. We've got a panel coming up in very shortly, in about 15 minutes. And thanks so much for being with us today.